Shadow Leader.
Thank you very much indeed, Madam Deputy Speaker. I'm sure the whole House will want to join me in wishing a very happy birthday today to His Majesty the King. Madam Deputy Speaker, the last few days in global politics have been extraordinary, featuring one of the most incredible comebacks of modern times. It was wildly hard to predict. Many people have panicked at the possible consequences. Some are still in a state of denial. But even so, I must say I am delighted to have been appointed as Shadow Leader of the House of Commons. And of course, I pay tribute to my immediate predecessors, the Luke Skywalker of the Conservative Party, the Right Honourable Member for Croydon South, and of course the great Obi-Wan, Jedi sabre-wielding master or mistress of the dispatch box herself, the former member for Portsmouth North, Penny Mordaunt. But, Madam Deputy Speaker, as with the Galactic Empire, so it is with the Labour Party. And recent events have reminded us of the truth of that ancient saying that power reveals. So it is with this new government. What have its first chaotic few months in office revealed? Well, first, we know it likes to say one thing and do another. It talks about supporting working people, but the rise in national insurance will hit all working people. It talks about growth, but it has imposed the largest tax rise for a generation, pushing up both interest rates and inflation. Only last week we saw a reported 64% rise in companies filing for insolvency compared to the same week last year. And that's before all the red tape of the new employment bill, which will make it harder than ever to give someone a job and grow a business. And, Madam Deputy Speaker, there is so much sheer incompetence here. To take one example, the government's raised employer national insurance, lowered the income threshold, and increased the minimum wage all at the same time. But no one seems to have noticed that the combined effect of these measures is to raise the cost of hiring an entry-level employee not by 2%, but by something closer to 12%. That is a terrible blow, especially to the retail and hospitality sector. So I asked the Leader of the House, was this deliberate, or was it just a mistake? And will she ask the Treasury to publish an assessment of the total impact of these three measures before any legislation comes to this House? Secondly, we know the government is willing, even keen, to play the politics of division. It has favoured public sector workers over private sector ones. It has driven away entrepreneurs and business creators. It has been absolutely punitive, as we have heard this morning, on rural areas. The rise in national insurance puts huge pressure on already struggling rural GPs and care homes, dentists, pharmacists, hospices. Mental health and disability charities have already expressed their deep concern. We heard from the dispatch box only just now that the government hears the concerns, but if it did actually understand them, why has it not done anything so far? Why did it not address them in advance? Meanwhile, the agricultural tax changes will afflict vastly more farming families than the Treasury estimates, families who work all hours, whatever the season, on very low margins. I can see the embarrassment, Madam Deputy Speaker, written all over the faces of the members opposite, many of whom represent rural areas for the first and very likely now the last time. And thirdly, we know the government seems to have zero appetite to take on vested interests or reform our hugely pressured public services. It has shovelled out cash to its union friends who have been delighted to stick to their fax machines and similarly ancient working practices. And what has the government got in return for all these millions? No commitments to make any efficiencies whatsoever. Nor does the government seem much interested in legislation. It has not presented many bills, and the bills so far have often included not carefully drafted law, Madam Deputy Speaker, but simply a vague and sweeping arrogation of new powers. This is what governments do, Madam Deputy Speaker, when they don't know what to do. The government is even hiding behind the very early presentation of a private member's bill on assisted dying, one of the most sensitive and complex issues we face. The Prime Minister himself promised Esther Rantzen in March that he would make time to debate these issues, but yesterday he refused the request of my right honourable friend for Wetherby and Easingwold to give the bill more time at report stage. Will that Leader of the House now give that commitment? Mr. Speaker, Madam Deputy Speaker, the astonishing fact is that after 14 years in opposition, the Labour Party came into office with almost no real plans. Instead, we have a government that's already lost its way, a government with no real sense of urgency and no positive flavour or theme of any kind. I ask the Leader of the House, we know what and who this government is against. But what is this government for?